Welcome to the entire plot of Queen of Shadows Part 6 by Sarah J. Maas. I've organized the rest of this book into parts and it looks like that this is going to be an 8-part series, and before some of you get concerned because it took me so long to get you this Part 6, let me just give my disclaimers. I was having some serious mental health struggles and decided to take the time, took a break from YouTube. Some of y'all were really understanding, so I really appreciate that. Then when I finally got my mental health in a good place, I started having issues with my actual physical health, went to a bunch of doctor's offices, ended up getting that figured out, and then I got laid off from my job. That was hard. That definitely, that hurt. That was really hard. But you know what? I kind of had this moment where I made the decision that my life is now full-time applying to jobs, and then when I'm not applying to jobs, I'm working on the entire plot. If you're new here, this is kind of a weird place to start. You should definitely start with Part 1, Book 1. And lucky for you, I have an entire playlist of all of the episodes of the entire plot. Not only do I break them up into smaller bits, but now I'm also releasing the entire plots of entire books in singular videos. So those are going to be insanely long as we go throughout the series, especially when I do the tandem read. And yes, guys, we are doing the entire tandem read and it's going to be crazy. But let's just jump right in to Part 6 of Queen of Shadows, Chapter 56. We're going to be starting this off in Aylin's POV. And they are currently planning their rescue of Lysandra. Remember, we finished off Part 5 basically finding out that Arobyn's last kind of action in his death was to report Lysandra as being a shapeshifter to the king. And she's going to be sent to Morath, and the king is having a meeting with the Duke's representatives, aka the wing leader and the Blackbeak matron, outside of Rifthold to kind of hand off this prisoner, as well as meet about something else. So as they're planning this out, Aylin is looking at a map and she is noticing that this meeting spot that was selected by the wing leader is near a temple called Temis. We won't really talk about that much right now, but definitely keep that one in the back of your mind. They're all going except for Evangeline, of course, who they left with Nesrin's father, and they are arming themselves, planning out this rescue attempt, as well as painting on themselves with word marks since Dorian's going to be there and he is a Valg prince now, so they just need to kind of have those extra precautions. On their way there, Aylin tells Rowan, "I can't bury another friend," and honestly, that line makes me unwell because poor Aylin has had to bury a lot of her friends. Chapter 57, we're still in Aylin's POV, but it is officially time for the rescue. So they decide to get there before the witches, before the king, before anyone else. Then, of course, as they're waiting, they hear the wyverns coming and they see them, and it's honestly like horrifying, and Aylin seeing those has her really nervous about this upcoming war. She's also not comforted to see the wing leader, which yes, they're able to pick her out in a matter of seconds, and Aylin refers to her as the most beautiful person I have ever seen and the most horrifying. In other words, Manon. So on the spot, they come up with a new plan because they take one look at these witches and their wyverns and they're like, no way. There's a good bit of them, but there's no way they're going to be able to take on these witches. So the new plan is that they're going to rescue Lysandra before she is within 30 feet of the witches for handoff. And honestly, the 30 feet metric does not really matter. Basically, the idea is they need to try to take a more stealthy approach than an attack approach. Aylin then turns to Chaol and asks him to do everything he can to rescue Lysandra and get her out of there while everyone's fighting. So there's a certain spot in the woods. She tells Chaol, okay, you're in charge of getting Lysandra to this spot, and if a fight breaks out, we will do the fighting, but you need to make sure that Lysandra gets somewhere safe. When he agrees, she agrees in turn not to touch Dorian, okay? So they come to that agreement when the King of Adarlan shows up. Chapter 58, let's start with Manon's POV because she actually really does not like this spot. Mind you, she did pick it, but the reason why she really doesn't like it is because it's still kind of out in the open in a field, kind of smack in the middle of the woods really, by this temple. But the real issue she has is that the king gave them a range of space and they had to pick within that range. So this is the best spot in the range that he gave, and she basically just rolls her eyes and she was like, this is what happens when you let a human pick the meeting spot. But she's like, you know what? I welcome someone to try to attack us because the 13 are ready. Then she notices that the prince who came along with the king, is low-key kind of a smoke show. And she's a little curious when she notices that he has one of those gnarly black collars on. Now, I will also note that this is Manon's first time ever actually seeing the King of Adarlan in person, and basically she kind of confirms, I feel like, what most readers feel when they read this. Like, this is just a slimy, crusty man. She's like, ew, like, this guy's just not it. Like, he's the villain, straight up. And although she hates him on the spot, she knows that she has a responsibility as being the wing leader of her coven and having to represent the covens. So she is, like, pleasant to him, and she does kind of go through the typical, like, introductions. But in her own little rebellious way, she leaves out her iron teeth. And of course, the black beak grandmother, who's also there, definitely sees this for what it is. So after all the introduction, she's like, okay, King, let me take you to show you this secret weapon we have been working on. A couple things to note here in case you're a little bit confused, because it's this big grand old secret weapon that we've been building up for a while. And they go into this like tiny wagon to look at it. It's apparently like a smaller version, like a replica almost of it. It's almost the prototype, if you will. So she's going to show the king this prototype in this wagon, and it's like enclosed because this is a super secret weapon that's apparently supposed to turn the tide of the war. So they go into that wagon. Manon and the 13 are standing around this wagon, basically daring anyone to try to stop this meeting, when Manon decides out of curiosity she's gonna go walk up to the prince. Now we're gonna jump to Kale's POV because he's having a lot of guilt because, of course, remember, he believes that it's all his fault that Dorian is in this position in the first place, and they're about to make this jump to rescue Lysandra while the king and the black bee grandmother are looking in this wagon when the wing leader walks right up to Dorian. Now we're gonna jump to Dorian's POV because this super gorgeous wing leader just walked right up to him. And what's really funny is that he wants to talk to her, but the Valg prince inside of him is fighting with him. Okay, so think like this is like a mental throwdown that he's having with this Valg inside of him. And the Valg is practically begging Dorian not to talk to Manon. Interesting? I would think so. So she goes up to him and she asks, "Are you man or demon?" To which he responds with flirting. Okay, this man, do you guys remember, like, in the first two books, Dorian was kind of known for being like a flirtatious little playboy? We're starting to see that version of Dorian again, popping out for Manon. And I want you to recognize the significance of this. First of all, it's crazy for two reasons. One, she's supposed to be one of the most brutal witches in existence, okay, and he's just flirting with her. And two, he actually broke free from the Valg influence to flirt with Manon. So then Manon asks Dorian, and I need this carved into my brain, okay? She says, "Would you bleed red or black?" Basically asking, are you human or Valg? And this boy drops the best line in any Sarah J. Maas book ever written and says, "I'll bleed whatever color you tell me to." Dorian. Anyways, so she asks his name. And this is also really significant. Okay, so like not only is this really iconic because of that line, but it's also kind of insane because we learn a lot about Valg Dorian in this moment, right? Now, I will encourage you to remember, and if this hasn't stuck out to you yet, or I haven't like verbally pointed it out yet, this is the time that I'm going to do it. And I need you to remember this. I need you to hold on to this. I need you to lock this away in the forefront of your brain until you get through the rest of the series, because this is so important, okay? Have I stressed it enough? Are you paying attention? Are you listening? What is the first thing that someone under the Valg influence loses? Their name. They forget their name. This was a thing with Kaltain. Remember, she like renames herself Death Destroyer of Worlds. This is a thing for Dorian now. He even started forgetting Sorsha's name. Like, he remembered that there was a woman that he loved who was beheaded, but he couldn't remember her name. That was also one of the first things he forgot, was his own name. When he sees Aelin for the first time after becoming Valg, he keeps calling her that woman, that woman. And I think even at one point even says like the familiar woman. Like, he does not remember names. Names are the first thing to go under the Valg influence. So tell me why when Manon asks Dorian his name, and of course the Valg inside of him starts going crazy, they get into this another like inner mental turmoil showdown, but then Manon reaches forward and with her fingers touches the collar on his neck and he blurts out, "Dorian." That's crazy. That's insane. And we're gonna leave Manon and Dorian in that moment for a second and actually jump to Aylin's POV because she just witnessed the moment where Manon reached out and touched Dorian, and she is absolutely freaking out, thinking that she's gonna like kill him or something. But then Manon actually backs off. After he says something, she walks away. So apparently after Dorian tells Manon his name, she walks away. Now that that tense moment is done, Aelin decides it is time to get Lysandra. They have already wasted enough time seeing what Manon was going to do to Dorian. So she starts going towards one of those caged wagons where Lysandra is. I'll remind you, she's been in these a couple times, so she knows exactly how they work and how they're built. So she goes, she picks a lock, and she reaches in. Obviously, there were some Valg guards around the wagon, and she unalived them all, stuffed them into this wagon, and then pulls Lysandra out. And then, of course, as planned, she gives Lysandra to Chaol, and Chaol supports Lysandra and runs her all the way to the meeting spot that we will get to momentarily. Right as they're doing this, though, that's when the king and the Blackbeak grandmother come back out of the wagon, and no one noticed that Lysandra's gone. No one noticed the guards that are missing that Aelin kind of shoved into the wagon, and so they all start to leave. The king has seen what he needs to see, I guess, and he's starting to head out when the Blackbeak matron walks up to the wing leader, and she just slaps this girl across the face because she's mad. She's ticked off. Now that the king isn't here, she doesn't have to play nice anymore, and she starts chewing out Manon to be like, why are you defying the Duke's orders? I'm sorry, this is about Duke Parrington. Basically, the grandmother goes into this big rant about like, yeah, I've been getting all of your whining letters and I've burnt them all. Like, I'm not responding to them because you're just being a whiny little child and you need to follow orders because that's just what you're there to do. That's what a wing leader is supposed to do. You just need to follow orders, stop questioning it, stop letting humanity get in the way. Like, just do what you gotta do. Be the witch that I raised you to be. Then, I will remind you, we're still in Aelin's POV for this, so this is like all something that Aelin is seeing and hearing. And then Aelin watches as the Blackbeak grandmother tells the wing leader to look and see what the secret weapon is that the king and her were just looking at in the wagon. So Aelin decides that this is her cue to leave because she's like, okay, so there's a secret weapon. I don't have time to really figure out what it is because of the witches. My main goal right now is to get out with Lysandra. So her and Aedion and Nesrin and Rowan and the whole crew that went with them, they go to their meeting spot where they see Lysandra, but there's no Chaol. Chapter 59, very quick aside to say that Dorian is obsessed with Manon and cannot stop thinking about her as they are walking away from the place that they just were. But I think what you're really concerned about right now is where is Chaol? And if you're not, then you should be, because we're going to jump to Chaol's POV to learn that he is running after Dorian. Basically, he has decided, after seeing what he needs to see, that he is going to put Dorian out of his misery. He's like, clearly Dorian is not himself, and it's my fault that he's there. So Chaol knows that the second he does this, like, he's not gonna come out of this alive. His plan is to pretty much run into the field where everyone was just meeting and unalive Dorian, and then him get unalived in the process. So he plans to go out. There's a name for this that I'm not going to say because I do not want to get demonetized, but he basically knows that he's not going to make it out alive going into this. So he's going to go out with Dorian, knowing that he put his best friend out of his misery. The funny thing is, and not really funny, it's actually kind of horrible, because he left early with Lysandra, he's not aware that Aelin and them already left and that the king and the matron finished their conversation. He left right before that all happened, so he doesn't even know that the king and Dorian are gone. So he breaks the line of the trees, runs into this open field, and is met by all of the witches in the 13 Coven. So we're going to jump to Aelin's POV as she is running through the woods because she's kind of picked up at this point, like, what Dorian's on his way to do. And she knows that the king and Dorian have left. So she's like, he's basically just running into a field with all of those witches, and he's not even going to accomplish what he's going to do. He's just offered himself up to die, basically. So anyways, they're running through the woods trying to find him before he does something dumb. Unfortunately, he already has, but they don't know that yet. Sure enough, they get to the field. I guess Manon kind of picked out that they were all coming back, and so she decided to hold Kale as a hostage. So they get there, Manon basically has her claws to Kale's neck, and then she also reveals that they learned that they stole Lysandra. So Aelin offers to make a switch. She offers to give herself in return that they get to keep Lysandra and they can have Kale back safe, but the witch reveals that she could easily take them all to the king, so she doesn't really need to participate in this little switch that Aelin is proposing. So then Aelin's like, oh, I think you're gonna want to take me to the king alive, seeing as that I am Aelin Galathynius, rightful queen of Terrasen. So yeah, let's jump to Manon's POV, and this to me is a big signifier of some of the growth that Manon's been going through, because you know what the first thing she thinks of when Aelin reveals her identity? This is the person that Elide has been waiting for. That is not something that the most brutal person ever would think. The most brutal person ever would be like, oh, let me unalive this person or let me deliver her to the king. But the first thought is like, oh, this girl that I'm pretending I don't care about, that I've low-key taken under my wing and been a mother hen to, she only finds hope to live another day because of the possible existence of Aelin Galathynius, and here she is standing right in front of me. But that quickly goes away because Manon's like, no, the right thing to do is take Aelin to the king, but she takes one look at Rowan, and she is a little nervous because although she has fought Fae men before and won, she can tell just looking at Rowan that he's not your typical Fae male. She can also tell by the way that Aelin is standing and moving that she's very well trained, but she's like fidgeting a little bit. Like she keeps like fidgeting with her leg, and Manon's like, okay, that's like a dead giveaway that you're like super nervous, but I also am not really willing to figure out how well trained in combat you are because you seem to carry yourself like you know a thing or two. And this is the point where Manon lays her eyes on Aelin's necklace of scars. Do you guys remember in Crown of Midnight when Aelin goes to kill Baba Yellowlegs? Baba takes one last slash at Aelin, basically creating a necklace of scars, is how it was described in Crown of Midnight, branding her as a witch killer. So according to witch traditions, if you know someone who's been branded a witch killer, you are for the honor of the person that was killed, aka Baba. Manon now has to kill Aelin. So Manon goes to make an absolute lunge to attack Aelin when she slams into an invisible wall and freezes, because apparently Aelin wasn't fidgeting with her leg because she was nervous. She was drawing word marks in the ground with her foot. Now let's jump to Aelin's POV because her, Rowan, Kale, and Aedion are running as fast as they possibly can, and these witches are way too fast, and they know that there's absolutely no way they can outrun them, and they don't want to run them right towards where they left Lysandra, so they decide to run to the Themis temple. Remember, they were meeting near a temple. This is that temple, but it is crumbling because it's abandoned. Something you should know about this temple, and the first time I read this, I was so stinking confused, but basically, here's how you explain it. There's land here. There's this big, like, ravine. It's like think of it like a giant canyon, okay? And then there's, like, another side where there's, like, more land. And then in the middle, there's, like, this island, but it's, like, on this, like, high tall rocks, and then there's this temple sitting on that, and there's like a bridge connecting it, but the temple itself is basically an island in the center of this canyon. If that doesn't make sense, I don't know how else to explain it, so that's my best. So Aelin basically sends up a prayer hoping that these bridges are intact, and sure enough, the first one is, barely, and so they start to run across this bridge. Aelin the entire time is worried about it collapsing because let's just say it's a crazy long fall down to the bottom of this canyon, which has a bunch of water at the bottom of it, but still, like, she knows if you fall, it's not going to be a pretty fall into the water. So they all make it across the first bridge when they see the witches are running after them, when some of them start shooting with bows and arrows. So Aelin starts dodging some of the arrows, and then when she goes to dodge one, she accidentally flings her body into the direction of another arrow when Rowan jumps in front of her and takes the arrow to his shoulder. Chapter 60, Rowan falls to the ground. Aelin's kind of freaking out when she notices that Manon is already almost across the bridge. She lifts up Rowan and tells him to run and go to the other side, basically get off the temple island to the other side of the canyon, when he tells her no, he's not going to leave her, and then she uses the blood oath and commands him. And you can tell in the moment that he's really upset and disappointed, but you know, he's under the blood oath, so he does it. So now it is just her and Manon. Aelin decides to cut the bridge right as Manon makes it across, and then when we jump to Manon's POV, we get the fight. And I'm not going to give you a play-by-play, I'm just going to give you like the main big points that you need to know, but just know that it is an insane fight, and Aelin and Manon have both met their match with each other. Honestly, it's to the point where Manon says to herself, like, it's a shame that I need to kill this girl, because I actually really enjoy fighting with her. Like, this is a nice challenge for me. Okay, so this big fight's going on. We're going to jump to Aelin's POV because their fight has gotten so physical, so aggressive, and Manon's like a really powerful being, so it's not just like your typical humans fighting each other thing. I will remind you that the Temple Themis is old, abandoned, and crumbling. So their fight is apparently so intense that this island is basically shaking and the entire temple is starting to collapse. Like, it's starting to just slowly fall apart and crumble. Sure enough, some parts of the temple fall in between them and they get separated while the temple is collapsing, and Aelin starts to leave and go to the other side when she notices that there is a string connecting her to Manon. I will remind you of Assassin's Blade. The last time she felt this kind of string was towards Yrene at the tavern. Anywho, this is also the moment where she realizes like this is going to be her best opportunity to get to the other side, to Rowan and Aedion and Kale and all of her friends, but she decides that she's not going to ignore this string and let Manon die. She is going to run to Manon and rescue her. So she does. She gets her out of the rubble and crosses her to the other side of the bridge, and by the time she gets to the other side and they turn around, the entire temple is gone. Not only has the temple itself fallen apart, but the entire cliff that it was sitting on has crumbled into the water below. Then we jump to Manon's POV for a split second because she sees Aelin running to Rowan and then she passes out, only to wake up later when the witches finally hopped on their wyverns and flew to the other side to get Manon, but Aelin and all of her friends were gone at that point. Chapter 61, Aelin's POV as they are making their way back from an insanely botched yet still somewhat successful rescue mission of Lysandra when they're like, okay, Rowan needs a healer, we cannot go straight back to Rifthold yet. Turns out Nesrin's father knows a guy whose wife is a midwife, and obviously that's not a healer, but it's, you know, someone in the medical field, so they decide that they're gonna go see this midwife. Sure enough, they get there. Her name is Marta, and Marta, the midwife, is taking care of Rowan, basically reveals that he is very lucky because the part of the shoulder it went through, it didn't hit anything vital. It was an inch away from his heart, but inevitably he's going to be fine. So Aelin decides to go wash herself off now that she knows that he's going to be fine when she runs into Kale. Kale takes the time to apologize and also tells her that she was right. You know, Dorian needs to be put out of his misery. That is really the best thing for him right now. And she has this moment where, you know, she's always the bigger person and I love that, but she turns to Kale and she's like, Kale, it's fine. If it was Rowan, I would have done the same thing. Like, I'm not mad at you for doing that. And this is the moment where Kale finally, he realizes that he's had it all wrong. Aelin is not the monster that he has painted her out to be in his head. Flash forward to a few days later because Rowan is finally healed and they're gonna go back to Rifthold, quote unquote from the book, one last time. Chapter 62, Manon is going to see the king? And she informs him of the rebels who attacked, and he's like, all right, why are you telling me this? And she basically just is like, well, I wanted you to know, like, that I'm a Great Wing leader, and I know what I'm doing. But I also think that you should send Dorian to Morath. I have some theories as to why I think she's doing this, but you know, think what you want. I'm not going to insert my opinions into this video. This is just the entire plot, as it is written by Sarah J. Maas herself. So, now we're gonna learn about the secret weapon, because of something that's said, and it's only breadcrumbs, thank you SJM, but I'm going to encourage you to remember this, take this with you, take what you can from it, and just kind of bookmark it in your head for later. This is what Manon says to the king. That weapon my grandmother made, the mirrors. You truly plan to use shadow fire with it? Make of that what you will. The king does not like how forward that question is, but honestly, that just kind of confirms the answer to our question. Now we're gonna jump to Elid's POV because, as you remember, she was planning to escape while Manon was gone on this mission to transport the prisoners and show off that secret weapon. And she's getting ready to escape, and all she needs to do now is grab the bag of supplies that she has been hiding in Manon's rooms. But when she goes up to Manon's rooms, she runs in to Uncle Vernon, who's sitting there and waiting for her. Chapter 63. Because Uncle Vernon is a bully, he's using this time to tease her, basically saying, like, why would you leave while your coven is gone? And then also mocks her for thinking that she's a witch. But the fact that she bleeds red and not blue and even draws blood to prove a point, he's honestly a horrible man. And then he reveals, I'm so glad that you confirmed that you're part witch, because now I have some really exciting, fun plans for you. And we know that when Uncle Vernon is saying fun and exciting, what he really means is bad and horrifying. And then he throws her into a cell. Now we're gonna jump to Manon's POV, because after her meeting with the king, she did head back with her 13 to Morath, but by the time she lands, she's already being summoned to the Duke's chambers. So she decides to take that time to confront him for setting Roland on the entire coven. Remember, she had to unalive him because she was torturing the coven with his weird Valg powers stuff. But you know what? He doesn't care. He doesn't care that she knows. He doesn't care that she's aware that he did that. He's just kind of like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Anyways, here are some files I want you to check out. And she's like, okay. So she picks up these files. She starts to read them. They're all about Aelin Galathynius, the supposed Queen of Terrasen. Basically saying that fire magic was used in Wendelin and it was believed to be her, and that she killed these 4 Valg princes, and that Aedion has joined her side, the Wolf of the North, and then on top of that, Prince Rowan has joined her cause and left Maeve to do so. And Manon's like, oh, so that's who the other guys were with Aelin. Then she realizes at the mention of Kale that these were not just rebels trying to spy or in fact even see what the weapon was, but that they were there to save Lysandra and Dorian, and that they succeeded in one and failed in the other. But she isn't considering the fact that the plan was never to rescue Dorian. It was to unalive Dorian and put him out of his misery. So more on that in a bit, I guess. So she leaves her meeting with the Duke after reading the files when she runs into Astrid, her ex-second and cousin. And Astrid just says, hey, we need to talk. They hop on their wyverns and then they fly kind of in the middle of nowhere in the mountains where Sorrel is waiting for them. And this is where Astrid tells her, I need you to listen and not talk while I tell you a story. So, in a nutshell, here's the story. At the age of 28, Astrid got separated from her coven while they were doing some witchy stuff and got her in a storm. A human man found her, helped her, and healed her, and fed her, and cared for her. Sure enough, even though he knew what she was, they did fall in love, and eventually, I think it's months later, she's summoned back to her coven once they find out that she's alive. But when she goes back to her coven, she is pregnant. She tells the Blackbeak grandmother, who was the head of her coven at the time before all of the covens kind of got merged together under the King of Adarlan, and this grandmother isolated her in a tower until the baby was to term. Witches having babies is super rare, but it's almost like this super sacred thing, because it's so rare. So if you're a witch and you're pregnant, you're basically treated like a goddess until you have the baby. So it's a very big deal. Astrid's exact words actually are a pampered prisoner for the Blackbeak matron. So take that as you will. So she finally goes into the labor, and it was apparently very traumatic for her when the baby was born a stillborn. And instead of being able to grieve the loss of her baby that she had with who she believes to be the love of her life, the Blackbeak grandmother gets angry and says that she failed her coven for not birthing a live baby, and so begins to beat her and refuses to let her see her baby's body. As if this wasn't already hard and horrible enough, she then brands Astrid. So deep scars on her abdomen. The Blackbeak grandmother writes unclean in all caps. And this is where Astrid removes her shirt and shows the scars to Manon in that moment. And despite the fact that this was like, what, 80 or so years ago, it's almost as if she got them yesterday. And Manon had no clue about any of this. She didn't even know that Astrid was pregnant at one point. And then, as a really sad, heartbreaking aside, as if that didn't already ruin your day enough, Astrid reveals that she watched from a distance for years as the love of her life waited on his porch, looking out into the skies for her, and she watched him age a human lifetime, and that's devastating to me. Anyways, Sorrel, like I said, is here, and once this whole story is done, Sorrel reveals that she knew about this, and basically Sorrel and Astrid have been waiting to kind of decide if they should tell Manon, and they were afraid to because they didn't know if she would turn out like her grandmother or not, but over time they can tell that she really cares for witches, that she values life, and she's not as brutal as she was maybe raised to be. So it's in this moment where Manon realizes that she has a decision to make, and she just turns to them and says, "Do you have a plan?" And they do. And we're not going to find out what that plan is for a hot minute, so you're just going to have to wait to see what happens. Chapter 64, this is in Rowan's POV because he has woken up and he's still in the healing process. Like, he's not fully healed, but he's doing pretty well. And Aelin, now that he's awake, she's excited to tell him all about the plan, but he's like, you know what, I have a piercing headache and I'm not really ready to talk about this. There's like this tiny moment where he briefly is upset about the fact that she used the blood oath to get him to leave her, but he also kind of sees why she did it, so it ends up not being that big of a deal. What he really wants to know, however, is why Aelin saved Manon. And obviously there was that whole string tug thing, and that's what we heard when we had Aelin's POV. I don't necessarily think this is her lying and being dishonest. I think there's like maybe more than one reason why she saved Manon, but the reason that she gives Rowan in this moment is that the golden-haired witch, which we know to be Astrid, screamed Manon's name the way I scream yours. So basically, it was this moment where she saw Manon as someone who had loved ones, and just like she couldn't handle someone taking Rowan away from her, she didn't want to be the one to take Manon away from Astrid, despite the fact that she doesn't know them. Like, she doesn't even know their names. Aelin heads downstairs to check on Lysandra, and she's doing well and she's feeling herself again when Lysandra reveals to Aelin that she didn't think anyone would come for her, and when Aelin asks why, Lysandra's like, I've never had friends that I could depend on before, and basically just expresses her gratitude to this amazing friendship she has with Aelin. When Aelin gives her a letter, all right, I don't think it's a letter, it's more of a contract, saying that Lysandra's debts have been paid and she is free. So Aelin paid all of Lysandra's debt, and she no longer has to be a courtesan and raise Evangeline around that lifestyle. Okay, now before I cry, let's jump over to Manon's POV because she's still out with Astrid. Astrid has just finished telling her their plan, and she has said that before they head back to Morath, Manon knows that there's something that she needs to do in Rifthold. So Astrid and Sorrel agree to go with Manon to Rifthold to do something mysterious that we're going to find out a little bit more later. Then we're going to jump to Elid's POV because she's now been in the cell for 4 days. Sorry, it's not funny. I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's inconvenient and it's horrible, and there's a comedic aspect to it, but it's also like, you know, we laugh so we don't cry. It's one of those moments. But she's been in this cell for 4 days, and when she realizes that Manon still hasn't come for her, she realizes that, like, I don't think anyone's going to notice when I'm gone. And the crazy thing is that we know that Manon's just had a lot going on. She hasn't even had an opportunity because she came straight from Rifthold, straight to the Duke's office, straight to the middle of nowhere with Astrid. So, like, she hasn't even had the opportunity to see if Elide is around or not. She also told Elide to keep her head down. So for all she knows, Elide's just continuing to keep her head down. Anywho, besides the point, let's move on to the next. Chapter 65, this is in Rowan's POV as he is training and trying to get back to his normal strength before their big mission, when he sends Lorcan. So he decides to climb up onto the rooftop, and sure enough, Lorcan is there. Lorcan reveals that he has slaughtered all of the word hounds, which is exactly what Aelin was hoping he would do, so yay for that. When Lorcan asks for more of Aelin's plans, Lorcan, however, is dumb, and he is mad that Rowan won't tell him anything, so he has the audacity to ask Rowan, would you rather be buried next to Lyria, in other words, his dead mate, or Aelin, your dead princess, when all of this goes down? The audacity to even ask that question. But Lorcan's doing this all for a reason. Not saying that it's a good reason, but like this is a tactic. He's playing a mental game with Rowan. Rowan basically wants to know if that was a threat, referring to Aelin as a dead princess, when Lorcan just says, hey, look, you don't have to worry about me, but you have to acknowledge that anyone in a position of power, take the King of Adarlan or Queen Maeve, for example, who either want her as a puppet or 6 feet underground. The odds of her making out of this are very slim. And you know what? This seems to have actually got into Rowan, because Rowan decides to cut a deal with Lorcan. If you remember, Lorcan wants the amulet, and he swears that he's going to destroy these word keys himself because he doesn't want Queen Maeve to have them. And in return, he wants to give Aelin the Valg immunity ring so that she can just be safe from the Valg and kind of disappear into safety. And Rowan agrees and hands the amulet to Lorcan. Now, before Lorcan goes off, Rowan kind of justifies this in his head because he's like, look, this way Aelin doesn't have to destroy the word keys herself. And then on top of that, I've never seen Lorcan break an oath in his life. Like, if there's one thing that Lorcan is honorable towards and takes very seriously, it is his word. So Rowan feels like this is a safe switch to make. So Rowan goes back inside, where he's met by Aelin, and he shows her the ring. To which she responds, how mad is Lorcan going to be when he eventually opens up that amulet, finds the Valg commander's ring inside, and realizes that we gave him a fake? That's diabolical. Basically, they just played Lorcan and Aelin was in on it the whole time. So like, I mean, that's good. I would have hated for Rowan to have betrayed Aelin like that, but diabolical. Now we're gonna jump to Valg Dorian's POV, and he's losing control again, only to realize that he's only really felt in control of himself around Manon. He did learn her name because when she asked his name and he said Dorian, she did share that her name was Manon. So he does know her name. And so that's the crazy thing. He remembers her name. So all he can think about is Manon right now. Interesting? I think so. Anyways, we're gonna jump back to Aelin's POV because her and Chaol are finalizing plans for tomorrow. So everything's gonna go down tomorrow. And he basically tells her that he doesn't regret sending her to Wendelin. However, he is very sorry about Nehemia and everything that happened at that time. She then apologizes for almost mulling off his face when she found out about Nehemia, but also says that she's also happy that he sent her off to Wendelin despite the fact that she was livid at first. Because, you know, she's grateful. That kind of needed to happen. A lot of who she is today is because she went to Wendelin. She found happiness with Rowan. And even Chaol is recognizing that. He's like, I'm happy for you that you found someone that you love. So he's no longer like jealous, spiteful ex-lover at this point. He's now like, I want what's best for you, and I don't think you're a monster. I think I was just hurt and traumatized, and I was trying to make that your problem. So this is a big healing moment for Chaol and Aelin. It's like healing moment for their friendship. And then at the end of their conversation, she basically just says, I promise I'll make things quick for Dorian, but if you want to take out Dorian yourself, just say the word and I will let you. But let's jump to Chaol's POV later that day. He is hanging out with Nesrin, and he's obviously a little bit depressed knowing that Dorian's end is coming tomorrow, and basically just wishing he had cherished more of his time with him. Guys, I'll remind you, Dorian was like his best friend, his ride or die, and the person he swore his life to. His quite literal only purpose in life was to make sure Dorian was safe, and now he has to be Dorian's undoing. And Nesrin decides that in order to maybe not cheer Chaol up so much as like kind of get his mind off of things, she takes him to the temple of the sea god. Okay, and from my understanding, this might not be totally accurate, but I did the best I could with what SJM gave me. So you know how like there's pews in a church? That's kind of how I imagine this, because they refer to them as like benches, but we're in a temple. Each of these pews are facing 4 different directions, either north, south, east, or west. And so Nesrin takes a seat at the south facing pew or bench. And this is where Chaol and her decide to discuss her heritage again, because he believes that her sitting on the south bench was very intentional to face towards the southern continent, which is where her father is from. And she says that this temple reminds her of the southern continent, which is why she likes to come here. And she's only visited the southern continent a couple times, but Rifthold has never felt like home to her, and she's desperately searching for a place that feels like home. And this is when oh my word, I'm gonna try not to cry. Kale takes her hand and promises that after tomorrow, he's going to help her find a place that she can call home. Then she turns to him and tells him to promise he will come out of the castle alive tomorrow. And that's when Kale realizes that this is not just the temple of the sea god, okay? This god is also god of oaths. So she wants him to make an oath to her in front of the god of the sea and oaths on the southern facing bench that he will walk out of the castle tomorrow. So a lot of symbolism there, in my opinion. That's such a small scene, but so beautifully written by SJM. The attention to detail is insane. We're just gonna have to find out more about that later, because we're gonna jump to Rowan's POV, who has his mostly healed shoulder, and he's preparing for tomorrow because him and Adian, their job is blowing up the clock tower. And so he needs to be in his good shape because they plan to blow it up. So him and Adian basically have to set up all the explosives and then run like their lives depend on it. And they're both either full or part Fae, so they have more of like a sense of the supernatural speed, which is why they are taking on that role. And then Aelin and Kale are going to be in charge of Dorian. So he's also struggling with the fact that him and Aelin are going to be separated on such a big day, but he's speaking to Aelin the night before this big mission, and she is horrified, obviously, and fully aware of how terrifying it is that they're going to be separated during like these pivotal moments that their lives are going to kind of be in the balance. And they really do have this tender moment. I wouldn't say they're trying to cheer each other up, but they're more just trying to comfort each other. And they have this really tender moment, and basically they hold each other through the night, praying that they're going to live to see past tomorrow. And it's just overall really emotional, but I felt like this would be a really good place to stop part 6. I'm so sorry. It's like a horrible part to stop, but it's also the best part to stop. So I will see you very, very soon with Queen of Shadows part 7, and we're going to be kicking things off with chapter 66.